But now we are transitioning back to Shravana. And we're going to talk about a very lofty text, a text which is sometimes called the spiritual essence of all of Vedas and all of Indian culture and all of Hinduism, which is the Upanishads. The Upanishads are a crown jewel in all of knowledge and philosophy, not just in India, but all over the world by seekers of many different faiths, many different mindsets, scientists and philosophers alike. Hold the Upanishads in very high stead. But before we get into Katopanishad, let's understand a little about the context of Upanishad in our spiritual diaspora, and then get into it. Upanishads are no different from the Vedas. There are 4 Vedas, which all of you would know: the Rig Veda, Sama Veda, Yajur Veda, Atharva Veda. Each of the Vedas, typically, simplistically put, consists of 2 parts, the Karma Kanda and the Jnana Kanda. They're very simplistic. It's a little more complex in reality. But very simplistically put, they have a part. Each Veda has a lofty number of chapters. In fact, most of the Vedas are the Karma Kanda, which talks about era-specific things to do, rituals to perform, mantras to chant, which are very beautiful as well. But some of that is era-specific. You can't do that in the computer age of 21st century. And they recognize that. That's why they divide it as ritualistic practices, which some of it, we need to keep the essence of it, but forget the actual practice of it. It's not practical. But the idea of that was ritualistic in nature. And the idea of ritual itself is to play karma to your favor. You sacrifice. The idea of an altar and a fire sacrifice, for example, was not fire itself. It was you are sacrificing your ego and your preferential take on life and your possessions into that fire metaphorically, so that karma works in your favor after that. For a person who has lost grip on ego, life seems more beautiful. And the metaphorical representation of that was fire sacrifice, or pouring it into the altar. But all of Vedas has a lot of mantras and rituals as the first bit of those books, if you call it books. The second part of the Vedas, which is the Anta. Anta means end of all of these 4 Vedas, are eternal. They're not era specific. They're not ritual specific. They're not specific to people of one culture. They're not specific to people of one denomination. They're not specific by gender. They're not specific by race, color, caste, creed. They are Jnana Kanda. They are eternal because they talk about the truth of life, truth of death, truth of the large questions, truth of consciousness, what scientists today call the hard problem of consciousness. The soft problem of consciousness, according to neuroscientists, are how the brain works. And with functional MRI scans and other things, you can kind of understand how the brain works in terms of when it receives stimulus. The hard problem of consciousness is where in this entire process that I resides. Can we program a computer through artificial intelligence in a way that in 20 years it can think and feel just like you? But can the I reside somewhere? Can we create consciousness in the computer? That's the hard problem of consciousness. Where in this human body or brain that consciousness resides? And the second part of all of Vedas talk about the hard problem of consciousness. Who are you? Who am I? What is Atman? What is Brahman? The relationship between that. And that is eternal. That is as relevant in the 21st century as it was relevant 2,500, 3,000 years ago. And the end of all of these Vedas, because it's in the Anta, so it's called Veda Anta. So it's called Vedanta. So if some of you are wondering, what is this Vedanta? There's nothing but the Anta of every Veda. That's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is Veda Anta. Veda means knowledge. Anta means end. The grand summit of knowledge is also Veda Anta. The end of quest is also Vedanta. So literally, it's the end of the book, and figuratively, it's the end of the summit, the acme, the crescendo of knowledge is Vedanta. So each of these Vedas, the Anta bit put together is the spiritual essence of Vedas, which is anybody of all age and all eras will understand that. And that's what we're going to study. That Veda Anta is nothing but the Upanishads. The Upanishads, therefore, carry only the philosophical highest essence of all of Vedas. The Upanishads, as you would notice when we go into it, don't talk so much about rituals, don't talk so much about actions. It talks about the jackpot immediately. It talks about eternities. It talks about you. It's most personal to you because it doesn't ask you to do things. It asks you to understand who you are in a very logical and in a way that you and I of the 21st century can understand. No dogma, no misplaced faith. It takes topic by topic and analyzes it. So Upanishads play an important role in Vedanta. So Vedanta comprises of 3 texts: the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, and the Brahma Sutras. But the Upanishads are the base text even for the other 2. So that's where we are in terms of, there are typically 108 Upanishads. I'm giving a quick introduction because we're starting the class with Upanishads, and I understand different people may have different levels of understanding of what the Upanishads are. There are 108 Upanishads, and all of these are not cast in stone because most of our traditions were passed orally. So they were not written documents of exactly, and there is no one founder for many of these Upanishads. There is no one date that we know accurately when each of these Upanishads were written. Some Upanishads were as old as 3,000-4,000 years old. Some are as new as 600 years old. So when the great masters like Adi Shankara, Ramanuja, Madhavacharya came in the last 1,000 to 1,500 years, pretty recent, they are the ones who really revived and interpreted a lot of these esoteric, encrypted, enchanting, mystical philosophy of Vedanta and classified it as Advaita, Dvaita, Vishishtadvaita, depending on how they interpreted it. So they doesn't have one interpretation also. That's the beauty of the Upanishads. Unlike other ideologies in our own world, where it can only have one interpretation, and the validity of that ideology is driven by the fact that there is only one interpretation. The Upanishads don't have one interpretation. The great sages, Adi Shankara, for example, interprets the Upanishad with the lens of non-duality, which is called Advaita. Basically, all interpretations hinge on one thing. What is the relationship between Atman, which is who you are in your unadulterated form, and Brahman, which is the eternal power of the world? That relationship is what determines which school of thought that you are drawn towards. It's like in Facebook, isn't it? Your relationship status can be married, it can be single, or it can be, it's complicated. That's also a provision by Facebook. Depending on, therefore, how you see this relationship, the marriage between Brahman and Atman gives rise to many interpretations of the Upanishads. Adi Shankara said it's one and the same at the end of the day, non-duality. So that's Advaita Vedanta. Ramanuja says it is qualified non-dualism. It's like a drop of water and the ocean. They are the same, H2O, but they are not the same. How can a drop of the water be the ocean? So Atman and Brahman are the same by composition, but different by magnitude. That is the famous Ramanuja, Vishishtadvaita, qualified non-dualism. And finally, Madhavacharya, he says it's duality. The Atman and Brahman cannot be the same. They are different. So on and so forth, many interpretations of Upanishads. I gave an example. I know I went into the deep end of the pool by talking about Atman and Brahman, but we will come back to where we are. But so there are many interpretations of the Upanishads. That's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of it. But to a realized mind, they're not different interpretations. They are rungs in the ladder. To understand non-duality, which is the crescendo of interpretations, it's useful to first understand duality, then get to qualified non-duality, then get to non-duality. Non-duality is like some of these scientists suddenly shaking our understanding of the world by saying quantum physics. It's too difficult for us to understand, but it's a ladder of interpretation. So that's the Upanishads, basically. Upanishads are very interesting because they appeal to the rational mind. By rational, I don't mean just the scientific mind. By minds which crave for an independent understanding of a topic. Not because somebody told you in the temple, but you want to understand what it means when Krishna says, see oneness everywhere. Last week we were talking about how can I understand that? So that's what the Upanishads cater to. So as you would understand, over the last 500-600 years, it has been translated into several languages. Do you know the first language the Upanishads were translated to, apart from Sanskrit, in which it was originally written? Guess the first language. You can use the chat or unmute yourself. Tamil? No. The first let me put it. First non-Indian language the Upanishads were translated to. Correct. Persian. During the Mughal rule of Akbar, the Upanishads were treated as such an esoteric and wonderful text that it was translated to Persian first. Then it got translated to French and Latin and so on and so forth. And the moment it got translated to European languages, it was the Enlightenment in Europe, where the great philosophers of Europe were in the quest for knowledge, in the thirst for enlightenment, as we call that era now, because they were out from their dogma of the church at that point in time, saying you got to do certain things, not do certain things. They were looking for an independent shraddha of understanding a topic. And so it appeals to some of the greatest minds in Europe. Famously, Schopenhauer, very famously, he was a big fan of the Upanishads. In fact, he said, in the whole world, there is no study so beneficial and so elevating as that of the Upanishads. It has been the solace of my life. It will be the solace of my death. Schrödinger, the famous Nobel Prize winning physicist, Schrödinger said, I have realized through the Upanishads what I have realized through science, that the multiplicity is only apparent. In truth, there is only one. This is the doctrine of the Upanishads. Niels Bohr, the famous scientist Bohr, who created the model of the atom, if you are also passionate about physics, Bohr, who stood up and fought with the greatest Einstein, and the 20th century is a war of the minds of physicists. Niels Bohr said, I go to the Upanishads to ask questions, because that's the only book where I can go to ask questions. Every other book gives answers. Upanishads makes me ask questions, that independent conviction of the world. So we can go so on and so forth. And it is not that these scientists, what they say gives credentials to the Upanishads. We're not trying to quote them to credentialize Upanishads. Upanishads are independently credentialized themselves. It just goes to show that when we look at things without dogma, oh, this is Hinduism, this is Islam, this is Christianity. If you only go towards knowledge, you find unification of a lot of wise things out there. So let's get into Katha Upanishad. And that's what we're going to see this week and some weeks to follow. The Upanishads, as I said, are 108. There are Mukhya Upanishads. Mukhya Upanishads are principal Upanishads, which are the most ancient. And there are around 12 of them. Again, some say 10, some place 10 plus 2, some say 12. let's say 12. And you may have heard of many famous Upanishads like Chandogya Upanishad, Brihadaranya Upanishad, Taittiriya Upanishad, Isavasya Upanishad, which is the first, the smallest, and the Mandukya Upanishad, Kena Upanishad, Katopanishad. And we're going to see Katopanishad, which is Katha, which is story. And Katha Upanishad together also becomes Katopanishad. That's the joint form of the word. And before we get into it, I want to give a piece of warning. The piece of warning is Upanishads by no way are an easy text. In fact, Krishna was trying to simplify Upanishad to Arjuna, and Bhagavad Gita itself is difficult to understand, right? And the Gita has been simplified into many other forms. Those themselves are difficult to understand. So Upanishads are no simple form to understand. But just like we try to do in this class, we will try to see it in a level that we can interpret it. And I will try to do my best. And I'm going to ask the same from you. So there are 3 rules of engagement that I want to contract with you, that we hold ourselves accountable to, for us to extract most from this week and the weeks to follow. The first rule of engagement is, let's come with an empty cup. When we are thinking of esoteric, encrypted, spiritual, scriptural knowledge, the last thing we want to do is to come with a cup already full, right? So let's come with an empty cup. If something provokes you, it's fine. You fill your cup with it as well. You can decide whether you want to drink it or not later, but come with an empty cup. Don't come with, including myself, let's not come with presuppositions of what our traditions have taught us, what my religion has taught me, what my priests or wise men in my community have taught me. All that is good. But in this 1 hour, let's come with an empty cup. And let's see what the Upanishads fill the cup with. And then, of course, go back and decide on how much of it is useful today, how much of it you don't want to use it. But come with an empty cup. The second is, whatever you understand in these classes, take it back and reflect through the entire week. In 1 hour per week, Upanishads cannot be understood. But if you stay at the subject till the next week, it gives a great source of understanding. And the third rule of engagement is what in Vedanta we call liberal knowledge, meaning a lot of what the Upanishads may talk about may not have immediate utility in your life. Like knowing Brahma Satyam Jagat Mityam doesn't change what you have to do at work tomorrow, right? It doesn't have immediate utility, but it has a grand utility. So treat knowledge liberally, meaning store it in your mind, keep it with you, even if it doesn't help you Monday morning. All of us are at different stages of evolution with respect to how much caught up we are with the samsara, depending on our own gunas. So for a Nisargadatta Maharaj, as we have seen, a simple nudge towards the truth allowed him to drop everything and become self-realized. Some people study Vedanta for 40 years. The penny doesn't drop. So each of us, with our own past impressions and imprints and what we call karma through our own gunas, are at different stages of understanding complex knowledge. So if it doesn't speak to you today, treat it as liberal knowledge, meaning knowledge you're storing in memory, so that in future, when you are ready, this knowledge you already have and it helps you at that stage, right? So that's why when our parents advise us something when we are young, it doesn't speak to us at that point in time. But if you had stored it at liberal knowledge, when life through experience takes you to a certain level, then, my father always used to tell me this. So let me follow. So treat what we say as liberal knowledge, because it comes of use either today or later. So these are 3 rules of engagement which are useful as we crack, modernists would say, as we crack the code of Upanishads. It's really a code. It's a fascinating code, enchanting code. With that, let's begin Katha Upanishad. As we begin, does anybody have any questions before we begin the Upanishads? Any clarification, questions, comments? This is your time before we begin.
So Vedanta is Ved, knowledge, and knowledge plus the end of the knowledge, So just a little more about Vedanta, because I'm finding that very interesting. What is Vedanta?
Sure. So Vedanta is not a book or a story by itself. So there's no book. Can I buy a copy of Vedanta? There's no book. Vedanta means, what is the crescendo of knowledge? What is the ultimate knowledge? So for example, one of the Upanishads starts with this question, not Katha Upanishad. Another Upanishad starts with a question. Mandukya starts with a question. Sir, the student is asking, what being known all becomes known? It's an interesting question. It's not just a play of words, Deepak. What being known all becomes known? Let's take an example. Say you're dreaming in the night, and in the dream, you're having a fantastic experience. There is a dreamer, there's a dream lover, there are dream world, dream trees. What being known for the dreamer all becomes known. The truth is, the moment you, the person who's sleeping in the bed, wakes up, that being known, all about the dream is known. Even the mysteries of the dream are known. Why? Because everything in the dream came out of your own mind, the guy who was sleeping. So there's an example of the question, what being known all becomes known? The fact that the dream was an illusion, that being known in the morning when you wake up, everything about the dream is now not a mystery at all. The bad guy in the dream was also from my own head. The good guy in the dream was also from my own head. The tree is also from my head. The sewage tank in the dream was also from my own head. So that being known, everything about the dream is known. There is no mystery about the dream anymore. Just an example. So what being known in life, all is known, is the question which is the highest form of spiritual inquiry. That is not restricted to just practices or rituals or meditation or sitting a certain way or standing a certain way. It is a combination of all, but led by knowledge. The jnana of what being known all becomes known. So that is Veda Anta. That is the Anta. That knowledge being known, everything else becomes just a process of getting there after that, right? Once you know the destination, the routes are plenty. Once you put Bangalore on your Google Maps from, say, Chennai, it can suggest 6 routes for you, but you know the destination you have to get to. Then it's just a process of getting there. The path of least resistance is going to get you there, right? Why would you take a path that is scenic, but which is 3 hours extra to get to Bangalore? Or one day you may say, I have the time, I want scenery, I'll take the longer route. That depends on you and your own desires, but the destination is there. So Vedanta allows us to understand the jackpot of the destination. Then it allows us to take our route, which will best serve us to get there. So that is Vedanta. Now, that answer to that question is derived from the Upanishads, derived from the Bhagavad Gita, derived from the Brahma Sutras. The source of all that is the Vedas themselves. So Vedanta, just to summarize, is that part of Indian spiritual study which restricts itself only to the philosophical logical and highest questions of what is life, what is Atman, what is Brahman, etc. It is a logical dissection of truth. So that is Vedanta.
Many thanks.
No problem. Any other questions or clarifications before we get to our topic for the day?
Aditya, I just want to know why did you choose Upanishads over all the other Upanishads? Just curious to
Ask
know
that question irrespective of which Upanishad we picked up. Well, Gopal, there is no particular reason. Every Upanishad is brilliant. The Katha Upanishad is neither too small nor too big. Like a Chandogya Upanishad is one of the longest Upanishads. The size matters. So Katha Upanishad. And Katha Upanishad, by the name Katha, story, has a brilliant preamble or segue into the philosophy. It doesn't start like an Ashtavakra Gita would start by saying, you're not the mind, you're not the, it just bores you to death with philosophy. Katha Upanishad has a beautiful storyline that takes us into that philosophy. So the storytelling is nice. So I just chose Katha Upanishad. There is no particular reason. All Upanishads talk about the same truth. The 4 Mahavakyas that we have seen in this class comes from the Upanishads. So all Upanishads talk about the same truth. All right. Anything else, friends?
Aditya, I had one question. Nikhil here.
Yeah.
So when we gone through Bhagavad Gita, right? I think the takeaway and the concepts, of course, it was mix of both, right? Few were something like light bulb moment, right? And I'm sure a few of us could even try to apply it from next day onwards, even despite of the fact whether we are successful or not, right? But there were few instances where concepts are on a higher level and it takes time, persistence. So this Kathopanishad, which we are talking about, how does it meet with the teachings of Bhagavad Gita? How does it align? So yes, I do understand that the broader question is about Atman and consciousness, but how does it match or meet to the teachings of Bhagavad Gita?
Excellent question, Nikhil. So it is no different. The Bhagavad Gita is being spoken to a person who is more like us, Arjun. So Arjun's mentality and mindset is more like us. He's a person his mind is doing the bidding. The strength of the intellect was less, and his ego is doing the talking. He is filled with misery and suffering, the samsara that he is in, just like any of us, isn't it? Oscillating between happiness and sadness and good and bad, and one day very happy, one day very sad. Our happiness is conditional to things outside of us going well, how my wife behaves, how my mother behaves, how my son behaves. So Arjuna is a representation, an amplification, an extrapolation of who we are. And therefore, when Krishna speaks to Arjuna, a lot of places he dumbs it down to for us, for Arjuna, meaning for us. And still that's not that easy. And therefore the Bhagavad Gita is an 18-chapter extension of simple truths which are smaller in size. The Upanishads, on the other hand, are stories of people who have tread this path of asking, what is all this? There must be, is there any meaning to life itself? And most of the times, the recipients in the Upanishads are not people like Arjuna who are caught up in the worldly problems. They themselves have a lot of Shraddha. Shraddha meaning they have understood the transience of the world and a lot of things in the world. And they have begun their quest towards spiritual enlightenment. So the Upanishad sometimes starts where a lot of other lower texts end. And that's why I warned all of you that there may be a stretch, but it's a beautiful stretch. So you should not be discouraged, because sometimes when you read the Upanishads, that also helps you give up a lot of things that we hold dear at the moment. It doesn't mean only after we give up everything worldly can we start studying the Upanishad. Then we will never start it for a lifetime. So sometimes seeing beauty, which is 10 times the radiance of what we consider beauty today, automatically allows us to give up what we consider beautiful today, to go for the jackpot. So the Upanishads start with the assumption, like Nachiketa, the protagonist of who we're going to see in Katopanishad. It's a young boy of 12 years old. He starts with that fiery quest of what is all this? He doesn't start like Arjuna, who is like filled with sorrow of his mind. Nachiketa is already a bright boy in that sense. So the Upanishads just take off where the worldly pleasures and desires end. It doesn't talk so much about how to lead a more happy life through your work or through relationships. It says beyond all of that, what is the truth behind everything in this world? As one of the Swamijis, who I'm friends with, very beautifully puts it, when all the clouds clear, when all the rain clears, when all the clouds pass by, in that clarity, the Upanishads begin. So the cloud here represents our mind. When our duality, when our greed and pride and wrath and our own mind and its worries and our own selfishness, oh my God, this, oh my God, that, oh my God, this, oh my God, that, when all of that passes away and your intellect lightens to think, what is behind all of this? That's where the Upanishads begin. And all of us do experience that state, not regularly. That's the problem, because our mind takes over. But when everything else is good in life, when all your mind level desires are taken care of, you have experienced the state where you start wondering spiritually, there should be something behind all of this. Is there? But we don't extend that curiosity beyond a few hours because life takes over. So the Upanishads anchors us to the larger questions. But it has great practical utility as well, because once you latch on to something more beautiful, then automatically you detach yourself from something that you have called the bluff of. The moment you realize it was, after all, a video game, you can never be as attached to it as a child is attached to it today, right? The moment you realize it is, after all, transient, you can never be as attached to it as you are attached to it today. So that's the business case for Upanishads. So let's begin. We're going to read a few original slokas, not in Sanskrit, but in English, and then pause and make meaning of that, and go back to a few more slokas, pause, make meaning of that, so that we are sticking to the Upanishad itself, and we're also trying to interpret it in a way that we grasp it. And of course, as you can imagine, these verses are written in a form which may not be easiest for us to understand. And so we're going to interpret it. I'll give you a context of Katha Upanishad after reading the first four verses. Once upon a time, Vajashrava, being desirous of fruit, gave away everything. He had, as the story goes, a son named Nachiketa. Don't worry if you don't get the context. We're going to talk about it. As the presents were being carried and given to the Brahmanas, faith or Shraddha took possession of Nachiketa, the son, who was still a boy. And Nachiketa thought, he goes to those worlds that are known as joyless. Those who gives away cows like the way my father is giving away cows. What kind of cows? The cows have had their last water and grass, which means they're going to die any minute. They are famished. The cow whose milk has been milked, the cow can't even give milk. And who have literally lost all their organs. They are thin and they are in the last few hours of their lives. So he went to his father and said, Father, you're giving away everything. To whom will you offer me? Father, to whom will you offer me? He asked for a second time. His father was busy, so he asked for a third time. Father, to whom will you offer me? The father got really angry and said, Nachiketa, to death I offer you. We say, go die. That's the same thing. Dude, just go die, man. That's the same thing that his father said. Son, just go die. To death I'll offer you. Let's pause. So what's happening here? So Vajashravas is performing a sacrifice that in those ancient times, people who are seeking knowledge and liberation often do, which means over time you've gathered possessions and periodically you give away your possessions. It's called the Vishwajit sacrifice. Yajna. Yajna means sacrifice. Vishwajit Yajna means you give away things that you accumulate. And we do that ourselves, isn't it? We'll come to how we do it later, but we also do that. We give away sometimes when there are too much of stuff in the house. So this guy, this man was doing it. And he has a son called Nachiketa. And remember the name Nachiketa because he's the protagonist, a young guy of 12 who's observing his father doing this, right? So what's the purpose of yajna? Why is his father performing this sacrifice? Yes, to give away his possessions. And at that point in time, possessions are mostly cattle. It's not so much of other possessions, but cattle are the most important possessions for these people. So he was giving away cattle, basically. Now, there are many ways in which dana, sacrifice, can be done. And I'm relating it to a couple of classes ago as well. The reason that he is doing dana for the sacrifice, as the sloka has said, is for the fruit of going to heaven, which means good actions lead to merit, which we call punya. And greater the punya, karma works in your favor. You go to heaven. Heaven here means you have a heavenly life. Your experience of life becomes better. Bad actions leads to demerit, which is papa. And the greater the accumulation of papa, you go to hell. Hell means your own experience of life is average, isn't it? We all experience that every day. A fit of anger, in that anger is ingrained a hellish experience of post-anger for the next couple of days with that person. In that generosity, the punya that you're accumulating is that in that generosity is ingrained the lightness and happiness you feel as a post-effect of that generosity. In having a loose grip of life, you are assured that things that are big events for certain people are non-events for you. We have seen the example of betrayal, for example, a few weeks ago. When someone, a friend of yours, does not do something he or she has promised you, that betrayal. For a mind that is selfish, it's a big event. You have PTSD problems because of that, isn't it? How can my friend betray me? How can my friend betray me? How can my friend betray me? I'm going to avenge him. I'm going to take revenge. I'm going to ensure he's betrayed by somebody. But for a mind that has a looser grip on life, when somebody betrays you, how do you see that? You see that poor guy caught up in his own vasanas. How else can he behave? In fact, your first thought is, the friendship that I promised him holds good only if I'm tolerating him during betrayal. And I can't hold his betrayal against him because that was not the friendship that I was into. I'm just giving an example. So for such a person, where is there a need to forgive when you haven't taken offense in the first place, right? So I'm just giving an example of how our own actions and intentions lead to experience of life as a consequence. So karma, as we've seen in this class, is a watertight logic which doesn't require an intermediary to match what you do with what you get. What you get is already ingrained by the intention and action with which you act in life. So for a person who naturally is forgiving, in this example, this entire betrayal was a non-event, right? Where was their betrayal? I mean, it's non-event. For a person who's naturally highly sensitive, touch me not, this is the huge event. It takes 2 months to get over this. So, and look at the experience of life. For a person who was ready to forgive, most of the time, the person who betrayed, he actually discovers what true friendship is and probably becomes a better friend with you. Whatever be the consequence of that, your experience of life is heavenly. People flock around you. You thrive in life. You're happy in life. If you have made it a big event for yourself, your experience of life is hell. So in what you choose to think and act and do is already ingrained the consequence of what you think and act and do, which is what we call karma. I'm setting this because I know some of you are new to the class today. So when you come to dana, which is the essence of what Vishwajit sacrifice was, which Vajashrava, the father of Nachiketa, was performing, the sacrifice asks him to donate, give charity. And the reason why those yajnas are performed are to improve your experience of life. The more you give, in that action of giving is ingrained happiness. The more you are possessive and keep everything to oneself, in that is ingrained a lot of sadness. How do we know that? In our own lives, selfish people are almost always afraid and stressed and anxious. When you see them externally, the fact that they are selfish has made them probably richer than you. And so we say, the selfish guy makes so much money, the giving guy is always poor. But what we're not seeing is their experience of life. On an average day, the anxiety and stress is a natural byproduct of greed and selfishness. A person who is naturally giving, the happiness and peace of mind is a natural byproduct. The person who is a high conjuice, every time he leaves his house, he's going to the temple, but all he's worrying about is, what if somebody picks my house? I have so much of black money under the staircase. What if someone finds out? So he's in the temple, but all he's thinking about is, I've left my house. What if someone raids it? What if the thief comes? A person who has nothing to hide, basically, when he goes out, even if he's going to the bar, he's fully present there. Going to the temple, he's fully present there. There's nothing to worry about. So it's not that selfish people are happier. The selfish people may seem to be leading a more financially or materially good life. But the logic of karma is that intention to intention, action to action. The action of being corrupt leads to an action level consequence of making money. The intention of being selfish behind that leads to an intention level of having a bad experience of life. So causation at an action level, karma at the mind level. So the idea of his Nachiketa's father performing the sacrifice is to give, but giving alone is not that sacrifice. With what intention you are giving is the true meaning of Vishwajit sacrifice. However, like most of us, his father is performing lip service to the original intent of the sacrifice, and Nachiketa is observing that. So his father is choosing the worst cattle that he has, which anyway is of no use to him, but he has ticked the box of the Vishwajit sacrifice as well. He doesn't want to leave what he has, and he wants to go to heaven. So he's keeping the best cows for himself, just as insurance, and he's giving the worst cows to those sacrifice people. Can you relate to that? See, most of the time, because we don't understand karma as a law of intention and motive, we do lip service to it at the level of action. That's what we are establishing here of what Nachiketa is observing. The three, how do we usually give? We usually give what's least important to you. All of us middle class people, when we were growing up, when you had to go to a friend's house for a birthday and you had to carry a gift with you, what would your parents pick? So that one tiffin box which you got from somebody which is least important to you, that's what you carry as a gift, isn't it? Or that something in the house which is useless to you, but it's still new and shiny, so let's give it off to our friend. You don't think about how is he going to make use of it. It will go circularly and come back to you. Sometimes you might have got tiffin boxes which you started the circulation 2 years ago and you got it back as a gift for your birthday 2 years later. So we often give things that are least important to us, but that doesn't assure what Vishwajit sacrifice was meant for, which is punya. That kind of giving doesn't give punya. It is still giving. There's no harm giving that, but that doesn't give punya. The other kind of giving is giving because there is no choice, right? Like a great example for that is companies, corporations. They milk every rupee they give in on Facebook and LinkedIn and their website and stuff. But the reason why most corporates do a little of what they do is because policy. CSR is supposed to be 2% of top line or bottom line. I think it's bottom line. So you don't have a choice, you give. So since you give, you milk it to the maximum. All companies portray themselves as highly purposeful companies who want to save the world. But you take the policy away, that you mandate them to give 2% of their revenues to CSR. Who's going to give, sir? Nobody is going to give. So most of the time we ourselves give in the garb of accumulating punya. We think we are doing it as a big sacrifice and good for the world. But the true intention behind that is because we're being forced to do it. So another form of giving is giving what's already useless. When we donate our clothes to our maids or helpers or drivers, you ensure that what you give is so useless that you're not going to repent it. When I was segregating clothes, when I moved from India to London 3 years ago, so many clothes accumulate, isn't it? Shirts and office clothes and pants and conference. It's just so many clothes keep accumulating. So you make the initial list of this t-shirt, give. This t-shirt, keep. Give, keep, give, keep, give, keep. You make those segregations as well. Give, keep. And you made a good list. You feel so happy that one, you've reduced what you have to carry to London. And the second is, wow, I'm so charitable. I'm going to give it off to so many people. Bring smile. I had 2 more days to catch my flight. The next day, as I was seeing these 2 bundles, it was like, but some of these in the give category are still, not that bad. I can still probably wear it. I can probably keep it in Chennai and use it for when I fly back to Chennai. Come on, it's not that bad that I have to throw it. So I did one more segregation of take some from the give to keep it to the keep. Finally, it became, say, 60% of that. So by the time I left India, I had probably some 4 or 5 shirts that I was desiring to give. Luckily, I changed my mind. But what I'm trying to say is, we give what is utterly useless to us. When we are sure that we won't regret that action of giving later. Oh my goodness, I need that shirt now. So that's what Nachiketa's father was doing. So giving as an action is same in all cases. So this is an intricate thing to understand for us. Selfless and selfish giving, action-wise, it appears the same. So when you see the great charitable people in the world, action-wise, all of them are giving. So terrestrially, it helps the beneficiaries equally, isn't it? But intention-wise, it can be very different. And your experience of life is not determined by the extent to which your charity is benefiting the other person. Your experience of life is created by the intention with which that action was activated. It's an important lesson in karma. Because you may be helping the world and you may be doing it truly. But the intention behind that helping, not the quantum of help you've transferred to the world, determines your experience of life. If the intention is still popularity or visibility, the moment the visibility goes away, the joy of giving goes away. But if your intention was helping for its own sake, then your joy can never go away. In both cases, the quantum of help is the same. So that's the first couple of slokas there. So Nachiketa is watching all of this. The young man is watching his father do all of this, and he's wondering to himself, his Shraddha, that's where Nachiketa's Shraddha is, his independent conviction of what is right giving takes over, and he sees the hypocrisy of his father's charitable composition. So what does he do? He looks at the cows and he sees the cows are useless to the people who his father is giving this to. And he realizes that this kind of giving cannot take his father to heaven. And he's pitying his father. You want to go to heaven, you have to give, but you're giving these useless cows. So he realizes his father is not fulfilling the promise of the sacrifice. And he knows the sacrifice means the father needs to give away all his possessions, not selectively. So as a young, innocent kid, Nachiketa goes to his father and asks his father, "Father, to whom will you give me? To whom will you offer me? I'm also your possession, isn't it? Whom will you offer me to?" So his father ignores him like most fathers do, ignore him for the first time. The second time, third time, and the father is super pissed. He looks at Nachiketa and says, "To death I will offer you. To Yama, which is the Lord of death, I will offer you." Now, there are many reasons, many interpretations of why Nachiketa had to ask 3 times. Because there are 3 levels of offering we do at the gross level, subtle level, causal level. We've seen all of this in the past. But we don't need to get into the myriad of interpretations. Now, the interesting thing here is Nachiketa immediately understands that his father did not mean it. That the father was aggravated and angry. Because Nachiketa knows that a person who's truly giving cannot get angry. The fact that the father bursted out in anger itself revealed that all this Vishwajit Yajna was a farce. He's a guy who's is emotional, angry, self-centered. That itself reveals that his giving was farce. Let's go back to the verses. So we ended by saying, "Father, to whom will you offer me?" And after the third time, the father said, "To death I offer you, Nachiketa." Verse 4. Nachiketa thought, among many of my father's pupils, I am the best, I am the first. Even on average, amongst the norm group, I won't be too bad. I'm probably in the middle. What will be accomplished for my father by me going this day to Yama? Meaning, he's wondering, his father has been giving average dying cows. So obviously, he is not going to accomplish his goal of heaven. And Nachiketa thinks, how worthy I am that if my father offers me, will he receive what he wants in return? So what's the worthiness of me? The cows were not worthy. Am I worthy? So what will be accomplished for my father by my going this day to Yama? Yama is the Lord of Death. So we need to pause here because the Upanishads are encrypted. Sometimes it jumps, and that's why it's useful to interpret it. So we've understood so far, isn't it? So Nachiketa says that irrespective of the fact that my father was probably saying it in anger, we have to keep, you'll find this common thing in all stories of the past. Ramayana. So even though Rama could have said, I don't want to go to the forest, he says, once the father has said something, I have to keep up that word. So Nachiketas understands that his father was angry, but he says that, listen, let's keep up the promise. Let me venture into going and meeting death. And in Upanishads, you have to give a license of creativity here because the stories prove a point here. So then starts Nachiketa's journey to go and meet the Lord of Death. Now Nachiketa travels to the abode of death where Yama Dharmaraja, Yama is the Lord of Death, the Lord who is supposed to take each of our lives when the time comes right for us. But even the Lord of Death has certain protocol to follow. If it's not the right time for death for you, Yama will be a good friend to you. He's not a bad guy all the time, but you can't escape him if your time of death has arrived. So these are the creative licenses that allows us to understand deeper meanings better. We should not fall in the trap of actually thinking death is a person with 4 hands and 2 legs. That's not the point of creative license. Creative license is what coming later in the Katopanishad. So Nachiketa goes, and when he arrives at the house of death, like a Game of Thrones setting, isn't it? Arya Stark going to the house of death and becoming a no one. Similarly, Nachiketas, a boy of 12, goes to the house of death, and there he finds Yama is not there. Yama, the Lord, is not there. He's probably in one of his tours, death eater. And then Nachiketa waits there for 3 days. He waits there for 3 days waiting for Yama. He's insistent. Till Yama comes, I will not leave this place because I promised my father that I'm meeting Yama. So 3 days later, Yama comes back from his tour, and one of his people in the Yama's house tells Yama, there is this Brahmin boy who's waiting here for 3 days. He's been a guest of yours, and he's a Brahmin, and it's wrong to make your guests wait. And please go offer your salutations to this guest who's waiting for you. So that's the connection between the verses that don't make meaning otherwise. If in anyone's house a guest abides without food, that person destroys hope and expectation, the results of holy association and sweet discourse, sacrifices and charities, sons and cattle, all these of the man of little intelligence. It basically just says you accumulate a lot of papa if you do not attend to your guest. Therefore, what happens? Yama says, O Brahmana, O Nachiketa, my revered guest, my salutations to you. As you have remained 3 nights in my house without food, therefore choose 3 boons, O Brahmana. Do you remember your pre-work now? Reflection on the WhatsApp group. We're getting there to what Nachiketa says. I asked you to think of if you were given 3 boons, what would you ask? It's impromptu. It's a table topic, spontaneous question here. Yama asks 3 boons because Yama has made a fault of making you wait. We should be so lucky that we get that. But what would we choose? We don't know. 2 cars, 2 bungalows, 2 cell phone, iPhone 13, whatever is in our top of our mind, we would obviously choose. Or some of our tricky people would say the 3rd boon will be 3 more boons. So like that, it can be infinity boons, whatever it be. Now, but Nachiketa said, Yama, the first boon I want is I want to reconcile with my father. I hope my father is free from all the anxiety that he may have about me. I hope he loses all his anger and he finds peace in his heart. May he know and welcome me when I get back to him after my meeting with you. That's my first wish. Nachiketa is a young boy, isn't it? He's really anxious that he has upset his father because he asked 3 times and the father said, go to hell, go to death. So Nachiketa is really carrying that burden that have I disrespected my father. At that time in Brahmin families, the father is also his guru. So Nachiketa is also his father's student. So he doesn't want to disappoint. So the first boon he asks is, let my father lose all his anger and let he welcome me as his son when I get back to him. Yama says, through my will, your father will know you and be again towards you like before. He will sleep in peace at night. He will be free from wrath when he sees you released from the mouth of death, which is from the meeting with me. So Yama basically says, granted. When you go back, you and your father will have a very nice, peaceful life with each other. Then Nachiketa talks about the second boon that he wants. Nachiketa says, okay, now that you've granted that, Yama, let's up the ante a little. You know, when you ask for boons, you first want to test with something normal. And then you want to up the ante. You're pushing your luck. So he asks Yama, this entire concept of heaven and, nor is there fear of old age, having crossed beyond hunger and thirst and being above grief. People in heaven rejoice all the time. Yama, you know the fire sacrifice that leads to heaven. Tell this to me because I'm full of shraddha, full of faith and full of yearning. They who live in the realm of heaven keep enjoying all the time. This I beg as the second boon. So the second boon that Nachiketa is asking is heavenly abode. As we've seen in this class time and again, even in Bhava Chakra, Buddhism interpretation, that heaven is also samsara, but is the highest level of samsara. Samsara means the web of the world, our experience of life. Because the self, the truth is beyond samsara. But within samsara, your self-effort and punya gives you the best, most elevated experience of life, which we call heaven. And in the olden times, there is a fire sacrifice. By sacrifice, I mean yajna. So fire yajna, or puja types in our modern times, or prayer basically. It's a secret mantra or a secret procedure. It needs to be done a certain way. The fire needs to be lit a certain way. Where again, as I said, you are transferring your ego to it in a way that your experience of life increases, and you go to heaven, and you're going heaven after heaven. It's eternal heaven, meaning you're there, you're enjoying. So how do I get that? Teach me that fire sacrifice. And Yama says, I know well that fire which leads to the realm of heaven. I will tell that to you, Nachiketa. Listen to me. Know that, Nachiketa, that this is the means to endless worlds and their support. It is hidden in the heart of all beings, meaning all human beings in our heart want endless heavens. Nobody wants the truth. Nobody wants self-realization, though we say we want it. Yama says, being the Lord of Death, he knows human beings more than anybody else, isn't it? So Yama says, Nachiketa, this is what all human beings want in their heart. Whatever they say is fine. They want endless lifetimes of pleasure and heaven. But I know the fire sacrifice that will ensure you stay there. Because for the rest of us, what happens? As we have seen in the infinity loop of samsara, a class around 5 months ago or so, heaven and hell are not permanent states. Punya, sattva leads you to heaven. Your life is otherwise well. You have a good family, you're financially independent, you're emotionally independent, you have a great job to be in. But does that stay forever? You get complacent and you lose sattva and become rajasic. You take it for granted. When you're fit, we don't take care of ourselves. 3 days in the hospital, we take a vow that we'll go to gym every day. We will eat the right way, drink enough water every day. We'll exercise. But we do that till a point when we are fine. Then we drop the ball. So this equilibrium of sattva, rajas, tamas. Nobody stays in sattva forever. And therefore, nobody experiences heaven forever. When we come to rajas, we get into the human typical samsara. Then when we go to tamas, when we are in the rock bottom of inertia, obstinance, ego, selfishness, we experience the worst in life, isn't it? Our friends move away, our wealth goes away, we are in delusion all the time, we blame everybody else. But that also doesn't stay forever. Because there is always a bottom point after which you're forced to bounce back. For you, it could be 30 years of abuse and one angio has forced you to stop eating what you were eating for 30 years. It could be just that sometimes it's not even hospitals, it's just your own disgust at your life sometimes forces you to take charge and do something, isn't it? After a bad breakup or a failure in business, for 3 months you are wallowing on self-pity. But self-pity only leads you to greater tamas. And after a point, you're disgusted at what that self-pity has led you to, the bad association and habits your own self-pity has led you to. So you want to bounce back. You want to give yourself a second chance. You come back to rajas again, then go to sattva. So the loop of sattva, rajas, tamas continues. And therefore, heaven and hell are not permanent places for us to go. Our experience of life keeps oscillating heaven and hell. So what Nachiketa is asking here is a shortcut where he says there is one puja, there is one fire puja, which assures eternal heaven. Meaning, people can continue to be in eternal heaven without the risk of getting into hell. But Yama is saying that is what every human being wants. You get what you deserve, not what you desire, is the law of karma. You get what you deserve, meaning Your Shraddha determines what you get. But every human being in their heart wants, I want to get what I desire, not what I deserve. I know, I need to actually do 1 hour of workout and eat well and sleep well. But I just desire I'm fit, That's what prayer, we have brought prayer to a point where we are commanding God or whoever we are praying to give us what we desire, not what we deserve. Because if you truly believe in karma, then you don't need to pray. Because karma in it is ingrained the fact that you get what you deserve, not what you desire. So your prayer is different. Your prayer is, I hope I deserve. That is the prayer is, I hope I deserve. The way we pray is a shopping list of what we desire. Isn't it? The audit needs to be, do I deserve what I desire? That's the audit. And deserve meaning, how are my actions and intentions abetting what I want as prayer? So Yama is talking about the hypocrisy of human beings, where everybody wants to stay in heaven forever. Nobody audits what authority or what have they done to deserve a place in heaven permanently. Therefore, we pray to God saying, God, pass me in my exam, make me a successful businessman, ensure that I don't get COVID, but I will go not wear mask, I won't get vaccination, I will go in a crowd. In what you do is ingrained what you get. So basically, but there is this fire sacrifice which helps you reroute all this path and offers you eternal heaven. Again, you should take it as a creative license to where we are heading. Nachiketa is telling us about different levels of boons he's asking. The first boon was relationship, with his father. Second is eternal heaven. The problem with eternal heaven, it's still samsara, sir. It's still birth and rebirth and birth and rebirth. You are happy all the time, but that question of who am I is not answered yet. That's where Nachiketa is coming next. We'll introduce that today, and then we will pause and get into Yama's response next week. But we'll introduce that today. We have 10 more minutes. But the reason why even eternal heaven does not quench Nachiketa, that's why he's going to ask a third boon, is eternal heaven does not give you the answer of the hard problem of consciousness. Who am I? It doesn't answer that. Like that famous example of, which I've repeated 2 or 3 times in this class, of Ramana Maharishi, one of the most famous and glorified Advaitic saint from the south, Tiruvannamalai. A big bhakta, Vishnu bhakta, goes and asks Ramana, you talk all of this fancy mumbo jumbo of Advaita and spirituality. I'm a big bhakta of Lord Vishnu. Will I also have salvation? Ramana always says, yeah, whatever be your path, be sincere to that. Ramana says, if you're a good Muslim or a good Christian, you're closer to being a Vedantist than being a bad Hindu. Very, very controversial, very famous though. Says if you're a good Jain, good Sikh, good atheist, good whatever, you're closer to God than being an average person in whatever you do. So if you're wasting half your time in life trying to bring down another ideology, then you've lost the bus in both places. So Ramana never actually says no to anything for people who go speak to him. He says, yeah, of course, you can be a big devotee. Being a devotee is such a beautiful thing by heart. So of course. So this guy asks Ramana, when I die, will I have an opportunity to go to heaven? Ramana says, yes, you'll go to heaven. If you do punya, you'll go to heaven. If you're a devotee, of course, you'll go to heaven. And he says, wow, thank you, Ramana. When I go to heaven, will I see my Narayana, which is Lord Vishnu? And Ramana says, yes, you will see Narayana. And this guy's eyes are starting to water because his own favorite god, his Lord Narayana, sleeping there in that pose, and he's going to see him. And he says, will Narayana speak to me? And Ramana says, of course, Narayana will speak to you. You are his devotee. Why will he not speak to you? And as we saw in the Gita, Krishna keeps saying, closest, my devotees are closest to me. So why will he not speak to you? And this guy is now full with emotion. He asks Ramana, what will he tell me? What will he tell me? And Ramana says, Narayana will look at you and say, go find out who you are. Even after going to heaven and satisfying all your desires, the question is a personal realization. How can Narayana help you find out who you are? You have to find out who you are. Who am I? Who am I divorced of my body, mind, and intellect? What is light divorced of objects that come in its way that it reflects? Space is filled with light without an object for it to reflect. So what is that consciousness that when it meets our mind gives us an impression of Maya, that all of this is reality? And what is that consciousness when it does not meet that mind in the deep sleep, when we sleep every night, that there is no experience? Just like dark space is filled with light, but no object to illumine. When we are in deep sleep, consciousness still exists, but there is no mind to illumine. So similarly, Ramana asks, you have to have an independent understanding of who you are. That comes with a process. And God will himself ask you to go reflect on that. Anyway, so all that's what Yama is consolidating, saying, oh, everybody wants to go to heaven. And Nachiketa understands that there is a deeper question beyond just material prosperity as well. So we will read through the third boon that Nachiketa asks, and then we will break the class. Yama then told Nachiketa, fire sacrifice. We are continuing the Yama's response to the second boon still. Yama then told Nachiketa that fire sacrifice, the beginning of all worlds, what kind of bricks and how should the altar be arranged. He is teaching the ritual of that fire sacrifice. And Nachiketa, being the bright young class rank number 1 student of the year, repeated everything that Yama told him with Shraddha. And Yama was very pleased with Nachiketa and said, I give you a bonus boon. You know, the bonus level, when you finish a level very well, you get a bonus points, right, in computer games. So Yama said the bonus is, this fire sacrifice will be named after you. Therefore, this sacrifice, friends, is now called Nachiketa sacrifice, Nachiketa Yajna. And Yama says, Nachiketa, this is your fire that leads you to heaven, which you have chosen as your second boon. People will call this fire after your name from now on. Now, Nachiketa, ask your third boon, the last boon that you have. Nachiketa says, listen, Yama, there is this doubt regarding what becomes of a man after death. Some says he continues to exist. Others say that he does not exist. This knowledge I desire, being instructed by you. Of the boons, this is the third boon that I'm looking for. Yama is suddenly struck. He's the Lord of the death. Nobody knows what happens after death. So Yama says, Nachiketa, even the Devas, which are the bright ones, the Devalok, again, poetically, it's a separate world with Devas there, but Devalok, from a philosophical point of view, is the wise ones in the world are the Devas. The demonic, tamasic ones in the world are the Asuras. So to make people understand, we say devas, people who walk the skies, and asuras are underground. But truly, devas are the sattvic people. And the Yama says, even the devas of old always had a doubt regarding this. Meaning, even the wise ones are unsure about this. It is not easy to know, Nachiketa. Subtle indeed is the subject. O Nachiketa, choose another boon, please. Do not press me. Ask not this boon of me. Nachiketa says, O death, O Yama, you say that even the devas had doubt about this and that it's not easy to know. Therefore, that's exactly why I want to know, because another teacher like you will not be found. See, to know medicine, you have to go to a practitioner of medicine. To know what's after death, I need the Lord of Death. And you've yourself said nobody else can help me with this. So, therefore, no other boon can be equal to this one. Yama says, Nachiketa, ask for sons and grandsons who will live 100 years, I'll give you that. Ask for many cattle, elephants, gold, horses, I'll give you that. Ask for lands of vast extent and live yourself as many autumns as you desire, and I'll give you that. If you think of any other boon equal to this, ask for wealth and long life, I'll give you that. Be the ruler of the entire world, I'll make you that. O Nachiketa, I shall make you the enjoyer of all desires. Whatsoever objects are difficult to obtain in the realm of mortals, ask me that, Nachiketa, I'll give you. These lovely maidens with their chariots and musical instruments. Well, I don't know why would someone desire musical, but yeah, I'll give you that. Such as are not obtainable for mortals, that people can't even imagine, I'll give you that. Be served by all these desires, but Nachiketa, please don't ask me regarding death. We will pause here, and I want to summarize the last few things. So, most of us have the desire to know what Nachiketa asks. But when the desire is put to test, in reality, we lose interest and go towards other things. So Yama is playing that game with Nachiketa. How interested is he really in this topic? A foolish master immediately answers the question which pupil asks. The truth is the pupil ready for that answer first? Number two, is there really Shraddha in that answer now? Have you, as a mentor or somebody, wondered when somebody asks a question, you thought it was earnest, and when you honestly replied, they start an argument with you? And it's like, dude, then why did you ask the question? Some people hear the answer but make no use of it. So Yama is telling Nachiketa, why don't you take things that people of your age or people, human beings, typically want? And we will see whether Nachiketa holds on to his fortitude of, no, I want to know what's after death. I want to know the truth. Or is he going to fall into the trap of Yama's sensory pleasures that he's offering? So with that, let's pause today. The reason I'm pausing here is it's a good point for us to reflect on whether we are curious about the same question that Nachiketa asked, or it is just but a piece of esoteric message in the Upanishads that we will hear from one ear and leave it in the other. So we had a long preamble today. Feel free to go through the story. There is no suspense here. You can read it 100 times and yet be curious about what it means. So we will continue from where we left next week. Have a great week. Thank you.
Thank you, Aditya.
Thank you.